everybody. So welcome to the first edition of the Messaging Maven in 2024, who we haven't seen yet this year or haven't had conversations with in terms of partners, clients, everybody else. Welcome. I hope the year has started off great for you. And today is mainly about talking about this year. So what are the big things that we see? What are the big things we think that might be upcoming across the year, throughout the year? What are we looking forward to in terms of developments this year that might lead into 2025, etc., etc., etc. And to help me, because I lack the expertise to really talk about all of the specificity of this area, I've brought in two esteemed colleagues from our side. One is Marcus, who is our head of revenue, running our sales teams, our key account management team, and everything else related to that. Hello, Marcus.
Hi.
And the other one is Tõnis, who is our head of connectivity, who runs all of our partnerships, everything industry related, and everything else in between. Hello, Tõnis.
Hello.
So starting with you, Marcus, how are you? How has the year kicked off so far?
First off, I think I bamboozled everyone when I said that we're going to recap 2023. That's done and dusted. So
good start.
Let's go with 2024. Yeah, it's been a hectic start to the year so far. A lot of interesting initiatives going on. So we're really trying to focus on what really matters and what makes an impact, both for Messente and for our customers. So making sure that we build what really matters and we help in markets that need the help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes sense, especially in the start of the year, assessing where we're going, etc.
Exactly.
What about you, Tõnis? How has this year started off for you?
As every year, everybody coming back from vacations, coming back from holidays, expecting a good, strong start. And then the task list only grows and grows and grows. And then we're already preparing for the first industry event coming up at the start of February. So yeah, haven't missed a beat and haven't had a time to even take a pause, let's be honest.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's the start of the year, so everybody's pretty much going full speed ahead. Now, so let's talk about what can we expect in terms of our clients. What can they look forward to? What's the year shaping up to be? So the first thing that we usually start with at the start of the year, or we see quite often, is always people do negotiations, understandings, review services at the start of the year, rolling into the next year, etc., etc. And another big thing about it is what happened last year and how do you assess and how do you evaluate when that change makes sense? Can you open up and elaborate a little bit about that, Marcus?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting topic because nobody has the time to change providers in November when everything is already rolling. You've made investments for marketing campaigns and resources are strained. So if you had issues at the end of Q4, when maybe the volumes were higher than you expected, then you really didn't have the time to focus on changing a provider in Q4. So what we're seeing is that we're seeing a lot of interest in talking to us and seeing if it makes sense changing the providers, how to benchmark providers, how to optimize maybe. So we're seeing a lot of conversations around that. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think the biggest thing to understand is that you can optimize. Mm-hmm. One thing is that you might have high volumes, and sure you can optimize to an extent, but there are many ways you can optimize the service. You can optimize the messages that you're sending. So what we're doing right now is that both for new customers and existing customers, we're going through the SMS usage. Mm-hmm. What content are they sending? Maybe there are incorrect characters there that will balloon the SMS volumes by threefold. So there's a lot of, in our eyes, I think it's like going over the basics that we know. I mean, we've been in the industry for 6+ something years, but we're going through the basics. So we help customers and set them up for success down the road so they don't get into that in Q4 of this year, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. It's this usual thing that after Black Friday and after the campaign season of November and then rolling into December as well for a lot of, especially retail brands, you're going to be looking into, okay, so what happened? And there's always this high potential of ballooning cost if there's a mistake made during Black Friday and there wasn't anything to do there. So a large part of actually this business quite often is optimization through advisory rather than optimization through cost, because that's usually the first thing that people tend to revert to. It's look at your Excel table, what's the SMS line, how much does it cost, and then can I get 10% off of that line, right?
Yeah.
Instead of looking how can I improve conversion and improve the usage of that tool and get more value rather than less cost.
Yeah, what the underlying problems are,
Yeah.
Essentially. And tackling those first, because there's always a room to move. In most occasions, I mean, the markets change, the prices change, operators have new ideas how they want to price their services. It might be more going up than down, but still, I mean, there are ways to optimize, and it's more about understanding the core business problems, and then we can advise from there. Different markets, how they're acting up and and changing. So there's a lot of interesting conversations taking place right now.
Is there anything practical that you would suggest if a business starts reviewing their service providers or looking into, okay, so I think I'm not optimizing my service well enough? What would you point at as the first thing to talk about or the first thing to ask?
I think the key thing is does the service provider help position the customer on the market? So if you're a company, you are looking for a new provider, there's a million out there, you have no idea who to choose. Like, does that provider help you understand, like, what are the features that you actually need? Like what are the needs that you have? Because we're the experts. They don't really care too much about SMS as long as it works. I mean, if they have peace of mind and their business processes work, then SMS is in the background. If it doesn't, then it's wholly different, as we all know. So, does the provider help you position yourself on the market? How much do they actually know? What advice can you get from them? Like, do they try to understand what are you actually buying? Like, what sort of a route, what sort of a setup, what are you trying to accomplish, what are the underlying business problems, what are your actual needs? Like, is that like manual sendouts, or is that an API integration in Salesforce? Like, what is it exactly? And in our case, as we work with a lot of enterprise customers, what we do is that instead of just getting one provider, get two, get a backup as well. That's what we advise our customers as well, that maybe there's something that goes wrong, maybe something acts up, maybe, the world blows up, you never know, at least you have a backup you can switch to. And we're totally fine with that, and that's what we advise customers as well, because SMS tends to be mission critical for the companies we work with. So don't settle with one only. That's usually my advice to customers, especially if the volumes go up. You're sending maybe 500,000 PIN codes a month. If that breaks, you get a whole bunch of mad people.
For just commenting in between here, I was discussing with one of our colleagues a few days ago about service level uptime, or platform uptime, basically.
Yeah.
And it's funny to discuss about 0.1% or whatnot. What is the difference? It's 99.5 or 99.8.
Yeah. And
I just did some quick calculations that 0.5% is around a little bit above 40 hours per year. And now imagine just what Markus said, that 40 hours, but if it's consecutive, 40 hours, almost 2 full days, none of your customers are getting their login codes. So that actually has an impact. So these are the things as well. And what Markus said, that we try to be more like a partners to our enterprises instead of just service providers, advising, etc.
It's also it also takes a fair bit of courage, to be honest, because I would assume that there are a fair few providers out there that would consider suggesting that a client would get a backup that's a direct competitor, would consider that absolute heresy. But at the same time, we're transparent enough and also confident enough to know that we can provide the best service, but also transparent enough to understand that this is a very complex industry to play around in. And you could have the same connection to the same operator in the same market as the backup has, and our connection fails and theirs doesn't, because you never know what updates happen on the operator's side, what dynamics happen. This is a constantly moving and evolving industry where issues can be coming up all the time, right? Now, switching gears for a second, one thing is anything related to the actual service and the actual business, but then of course there's legislatory powers coming into this as well. One of the things that obviously has popped up on our radar ever since last year, and that has been something we're putting more thought, resources, effort, and everything else into, is the Digital Operations Resilience Act, or DORA. Who doesn't know what DORA is, then DORA is pretty much a pan-EU security measure, security protocol, security law type of a thing that essentially is created to add security or define security or improve digital resilience and risk management for financial service providers, but also a fair bit of KYC providers, lenders, insurers, banks, payment providers, anything in between. So it is a very, very large piece of legislation that sets a whole host of requirements to anybody who is a critical service provider. We work with a lot of financial institutions. We work with a lot of businesses that are in the ancillary fields to the financial services as well, who are very much affected by DORA. And for them, we're a critical service provider. And if you're a critical service provider, there's also a whole host of new security requirements that are going to be coming to your table that you need to fulfill. And it's not related to simply just having a secure platform, but it's also a step towards transparency, at least in my mind, because a part of that is you are required to also report which sort of risk management measures you are putting into action. Which types of different systems are you looking to apply? How are you going to report about that? Not just the risk management systems, but it also comes with an annual commitment to, whoever you are providing the service with, the financial service, to also give an annual report of your risk assessments, what you've done, what type of measures you're implemented, what you've updated, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
So what you're essentially saying is that it's almost like GDPR level legal pains. So so the customers that we signed updated service agreements with at the end of last year.
Yes.
That means the fun is not done.
Yes.
So we're gonna get into that this whole year, which means that when we're comparing service providers, then we're probably it's gonna be a topic for those companies as well, especially those in financial services, KYC, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
So comparing different service providers, that's gonna be a new checkbox in your list that you need to assure that you have.
Exactly. If we think back to 2025, when GDPR rolled out, then the first thing that everybody did was you signed data protection agreements or data processing agreements with every single provider that was a third-party service provider. And everybody needed to overhaul their systems to be GDPR compliant, and everybody added new documents to that. Well, DORA comes with its own clauses as well that are inevitably going to be added to contracts. So yay for legal teams, you're going to really earn your money this year again. And the big thing about DORA is that it goes into effect January 2025. So it's a year's worth of effort to actually go into all of this. And it's the question of, okay, so what are the practicalities of DORA? What are the things that this will actually result in for businesses and for aggregators as well? Is that while no agreement, including GDPR, including DORA, including anything else, doesn't specifically specify the type of, let's say, standard that you need to adhere to, or the type of documents that you need to be able to provide specifically, it leaves very little room to not get like an ISO 27001 or a SOC 2 or something like that. Essentially, what they are looking for is a recognized industry standard to which you adhere to. So that it is a very important part of this business for anybody who doesn't have that and actually has financial services to build that, get that accreditation done, and actually get that peace of mind for your businesses. But it's also a differentiator in the market because let's be honest, ISOs are expensive. All of this security work is expensive. You need to be a strong, viable, forward-looking business to be able to invest vast sums of money into your security and legal apparatus this year during an economic downturn to be ready for 2025.
And I think who does this affect? It affects companies that might even be financial service providers, but they're working with a local company in one specific market. They're really good at one market, but will they go through the effort of actually getting that done this year? There's just something to pay attention to, I guess.
Yeah, it requires a lot of resource allocation to be able to do something like this, and it is something where you also need to evaluate. And then, but the good thing about it is it comes with a lot of perks as well. You'll get a more secure, more transparent business. You will get a peace of mind, which we've stood behind for such a long time that you need to have peace of mind in scaling your business instead of worrying SMS.
Yeah,
the same thing about the security side of that as well. So it's an absolutely vital thing, I think, for businesses like us that do build towards that transparency and actually want to build secure messaging at scale. Now, let's switch gears for a second. Tõnis, it's time for your show. So what are you seeing that's changing in the market? I have a few keywords. We just finished with regulators and then regulations and legal matters that are coming up. So what are you seeing on the regulatory or brand fields coming into play from the industry side?
I love the feeling that I know more than you about this nowadays. Because it wasn't like that a year and a half ago.
Fine.
No, it's it was interesting to listen more closely about what you guys were talking about, and especially from the regulator standpoint. I don't think it's a surprise that we are trying to advocate perhaps even more restrictions, regulations, etc. in our, let's say, footprint destinations, because it's our job to protect the brands that we're servicing, right? But at the same time, we need that international understanding, that the regulators themselves understand what they're doing as well on those specific markets. And one of the just interesting things that popped up recently, and unlike Markus, I'm happy to mention 2023 as well. Last year, Italy started implementing change for differentiation between international and local brands, right? What it meant, the idea was very, very simple, that international brands will be terminated to the users with local long number, basically hiding the brand more or less. And local entities, local brands are able to register themselves in alias, which, we call it the alphanumeric sender ID, your brand.
Pretty much like a brand name.
Yeah. Well, who is in charge of that? First of all, it seems that the ball is being thrown around, basically. The regulator says that all the local, only local aggregators who are registered in with AGCOM, they can actually do it. The local aggregators are saying that no, that we international aggregators, we need to be compliant with it. So it's kind of like a little bit of a messy situation, which, has a good thing in mind, perhaps, but the execution has been quite troublesome, because up to this point, it's possible to send with an international sender ID, and it's delivered as sent. So it hasn't been very, very hard cut off, because it feels it's kind of messy in there. At the same time, if we're talking about enterprises, our customers come asking us, we need to showcase our brand. So as international brands, how can they do that? That's where we can come in, right? What are the regulations? You can push more in the content side, because we want to adhere to the regulations, right? At the same time, local companies, how they are solving this for them, because they need to do steps as well to register their alias and all that. So I think now looking forward to 2024, it's just only one sample is Italy. But I think it does require a little bit of an overhaul on an international level, because none of the aggregators that we are working with work on one market. Well, maybe some do. They're experts in one market, but it's a global industry. So we are trying to push that forward, but at the same time, the local regulators, maybe we should meet up all together to understand how we can execute those things a little bit better.
Are there any spicy markets in your eyes that are taking too much attention or are troublesome right now?
Too much spice. No, it's difficult to bring out only like one or two. Of course, yet again, very similar local versus international differentiation in Mexico.
I had some sleepless nights with that.
So did we. And then, of course, one bigger, let's say, network hub is trying to implement something similar in other Latin American markets in the testing phase. Yet again, hasn't succeeded to that level. A little bit similar to the Italy question that we mentioned. And of course, talking about higher prices for text messages, differences in new exclusivities, et cetera. So the amount of information that is coming or piling up day after day, it's only increasing. And, this is one of our goals for this year as well, to be better at how to comb through that information. To make it easily understandable for my team, which manages business development for the aggregation wholesale side. We need to know all of that to be good at our job, but also pass it down. And that's the internal communication with the enterprise team, that they need to know that as well at the same time that it's happening, to know ahead, because all of those switches and, small things take much longer time on the enterprise side.
Yeah. But to a large extent, Europe is kind of safe from changes right now, or okay.
Let's focus on the positive right now. If we're talking about Europe, so yet again, starting from last year, UK started slowly implementing brand verification or sender ID verification in smaller operators. So we are happy to see that again, because it makes our life a little bit easier. Of course, it takes the time, resource to actually go through all these things. Our procurement team is probably not too excited about
becoming a legal team already.
More or less, but it does give a little bit more transparency, especially for those aggregators and our partners that we are working with. If there's a shift on the market, let's go with it. And at the same time, the main idea behind it was to clean up the market from bad traffic. We have been talking about this for the past year, being anti-fraud stance and all that. It's amazing to finally see that in Europe, which has been widely as I don't want to say free for all, but let's say plug and play type of market, it's getting a little bit more difficult or more regulated in a way that the brands are actually more protected, and of course the end users as well.
I think that makes a lot of sense, but classically, whenever regulators step in to try to adjust something, the first iteration is complete hash, because ultimately they tend to not include the organizations that will then be handling that entire situation, and sometimes don't understand the nuances of an industry as well. I mean, you say regulators don't understand nuances. Even our own clients who use the service don't understand the nuances. So what do we expect? Even our own partners quite often don't understand the nuances between one thing and another, soil the market, etc. So it is a difficult game regardless of how you spin it. But again, at the same time, it's nothing new under the sun. It's getting more regulated. There's going to be more difficulties to overcome. There's going to be more to explain. And ultimately, at the end of the day, the businesses that will win out are the ones who are able to then navigate this field effectively, give good advice, and help businesses succeed, because that's our job within the industry as well. Take that knowledge, help businesses succeed, not carry that difficulty over to them. It just requires, many more hours of reading through documents and doing templates and sending out forms.
What does this mean to the end customer?
We are trying to be like epic project managers in between the development team of the regulators and the sales team who wants the product now.
But what do the practicalities look like for a business? Let's take the Mexico example and Italy example. What does it mean for the business beside the fact of, there's going to be differentiation, but what does it look like for them when they start registering? What do they need to do today to be more compliant?
So luckily today it's still relatively easy, right? It's very I don't want to say simplified, but still, let's put it like that, simplified brand registration. And it's very easy to do if you have a local entity or sending servicing local customers in the local language. Simple as
And
that.
if you don't,
Then you pay more. No, but it's true, because all of those regulators, they're trying to protect the local market and at the same time enable local businesses. So eventually it's going to be the international brands that probably end up paying a little bit more. But the main goal for those markets, and of course for us as well, we want to be the closest to the MNOs, first of all, and also work the most closely with the enterprises in those local markets where they operate.
Fair enough. So before we move into conclusions and actually draw this shindig to a close, I have a question for you. What do you think? If you went down the route of international versus local traffic globally, and international brands would pay more and would have a much harder time of actually registering their business, would transition away from SMS, but local businesses would continue using it, create those national differentiations, would be more there for their clients in the local language, etc., etc. Do you see this changing the complete dynamic and understanding of how SMS is used as a communication channel as compared to now, where international traffic is predominantly used for one-time passcodes and local traffic is predominantly used for transactional and reminders and stuff like that? Could the channel itself then transition towards that model, or what do you think, Marcus?
I think if we see price increases that are like 10 or 20 times compared to what they were like a month ago in some markets, if you see that happening, I mean, volumes will go down. You will see alternative channels come up. You will see that maybe email isn't as bad. So there's a lot of impact it can have. I mean, it's almost like a domino effect. You saw that international local pricing started off in the CIS region, I think, from Azerbaijan and so on. And then it's like Southeast Asia, and now it's like coming around to South America. I don't know what the exact impact of it has been in CIS. So if we want to see how it has impacted the usage, so it's probably the best case study because it has existed the longest there.
I think it was I might be remembering it incorrectly, but there was one example from one of the operators in Middle East. So when the price hike happened, it was a 10x drop in international volume for international brands. So it is significant. And just to continue on your thought, everybody's talking that we need to follow the money, right? But we need to follow the enterprise's money because that's where the bottom line ROI actually is the most impactful thing. That's the decision maker.
Yeah.
And I think even for Messente, we are not talking about us as an SMS company anymore. We are talking about a messaging company. So I want to open it, welcome with open arms, that if we have those alternative channels, as long as it's never going to be as simple as SMS, of course, but it needs to be made easier to the actual enterprises for them to onboard the alternative channels, basically.
Yeah. Okay, so concluding thoughts. Marcus, how would you sum up your expectations for 2024?
I think that customers that finally settled on an SMS provider, they kind of need to rethink that. There are ways to do that, and we'd be happy to advise. So it's best discussing things over, like what to look out for. I mean, getting two providers, making sure that they have all the paperwork and making sure that they help you position yourself on the market. I think that's critical, and seeing how things are changing all the time. It never gets boring, for Tõnis at least. That you kind of want the partner that keeps on top of those changes because they're happening constantly. I mean, we're talking about 197 countries and territories where maybe the operators themselves don't know how to implement change and what the change should be. So you get many different iterations of those changes. So everything changes all the time. And you want a partner that keeps on top of those changes, and you can have peace of mind and not think about SMS as long as everything kind of works,
Yeah, fair. Tõnis?
It's definitely going to be an interesting year, and I say it at the most positive way possible. I think the biggest shift that we're going to see, and now I'm going to a little bit focus more on the wholesale market, is the, I don't say decrease or increase, but I think it's going to be more, we're going to see more consolidation. So that, you know, those trusted partners within each other are going to start working more closely, and it's going to be a little bit harder to get in from the outside. So not saying impossible, but it does put companies, and I don't want to toot my own horn, but companies like Messente who have our own traffic, our own business, we are not trying to act as the intermediaries doing swap deals only. So it does create a little bit of a differentiation in value of how to move forward, because that brings the stability. And I am all for stable growth, and I really hope that we're going to see it this year as well.
So it's the importance of that institutional knowledge. Interestingly enough, shining through both of your perspective is one of understanding the business and actually working with retail customers, and the other side being able to advise them, be an actual partner, drive business forward, help, assist. It's this idea that we've been talking about for such a long time, that we are perfectly fine advising a client out of more traffic if less traffic is better for their business in the long run, because when their business succeeds, we succeed with them. It's the short-term versus long-term mentality. A lot of businesses are here to make the best out of it for 2 or 3 years. We've been in this game for 11 years this year. Messente will be 11 years old in February, and we plan to be here for another 10 at least. So it's this idea of where are we going, what are we doing, and how do we build a stable business and help our customers grow in the long run, as well as our partners grow in the long run as well. Cool. Let's do some questions. From Mariana, what's your take on messaging personalization for 2024? People usually just skim SMS, so will messaging providers offer some sort of copywriting and branding guidance? I'm going to put this to you. What do you think? Are we going to start offering copywriting and branding guidance?
I think we already do that.
Fair. Fair, we do.
I mean, going through, I think today even as advising a customer on what are the best sender names to use in a specific market. I'd like to get into the details, but how can you get your money from people that don't pay their loans? And so we're already doing that. So things like making sure that you use branded short links to increase trust. When to send messages. I think Tavi created a stellar pillar page on our website that goes through SMS marketing, when to send messages, what sort of call to action to use. So I think we're already doing that. If there's any questions on that, I think we can already advise customers on that.
And it's not only branding and copywriting in terms of like marketing activities, but it's also the fact that last year we also started doing anti-fraud audits, when we actually look at certain businesses' content and advise them, maybe don't use this hyphenated, URL in there, because you're opening yourselves up to a multitude of other things. So in reality, a part of advisory is already working on helping them achieve the best results with SMS, because ultimately we do know best how to use that channel.
I think a great example is that some banks actually share what sort of SMS messages do they send.
Yeah.
So if you go to HSBC, they actually have brand guidelines as well, that here are the sort of SMS messages you can expect from us. So if they follow all the same structure or the idea, I guess, and you see what they look like, then it's maybe easier for the end customers not to fall victim to fraud or not sending links. You know, that's a thing our brand does, outlining that. We'll never send you links.
Yeah.
What I would like to say is just don't be afraid to ask.
Fair.
Ask for the guidance. Ask for the, I don't want to say copy, but ask for the copy. Because, yet again, we can help. We know this. As you said, we are the experts in the industry. We are happy to do that.
Agreed. Let's see, what other questions do we have? From Ben, will AIT grow or slow down this year? I'll take that. I think it will slow down to an extent. I think that last year, the wild bonanza that was started with AIT and the resulting decline in traffic, especially from certain major brands that simply made a decision to not use it at all. I think it was either American Express or Bank of America that decided to not use SMS at all or limit the usage extremely for only super necessary cases. I think that it had such a large impact on a lot of businesses that were just treating this game as something that will run forever and got burned. And we could actually see that through Q4 performance as well. You could see that this year's last quarter wasn't as active on the client side as the rest of the year would have possibly indicated. You usually assume that if you take the average for the year, then you can assume at least, a 50% increase to 100 to 200% increase in Q4. And we didn't see that. We saw an increase, but we didn't see the same jump in the increase. And you could see the strain potentially on the businesses and the market as well. So I think it will slow down. I don't think it's going anywhere. I think it'll slow down. But at the same time, I hate to say we told you so, but we goddamn told you so. AIT was a bad idea from the start. It impacted a lot of businesses. It eroded trust. Now it's our job to start building that trust back up again, advising, being better partners going forward.
I just want to give a shout out to Nick Lane.
Yeah.
Because when I think it was one of the MEF events, his projection for AIT, and you can see the graph, it's 2024 is going to be the peak and then it's going to go start slowing down. I had no faith in that.
Yeah.
I did not believe that to a second.
Yeah.
but
it got pretty scary there.
Yeah.
But that's the holiday because it got just too big, too fast.
Yep.
And then everybody got burned.
Yep. Exactly.
But what about those markets where you have exclusive providers? Where
we'll see.
That's why we're seeing so many change in exclusivities, perhaps.
True. I mean, one of the things that we talked about was the question of exclusivity and how it plays into AIT, and the fact that it is a fact that if you take the correlation, if you draw a map of exclusive destinations and high likelihood of AIT, then there is a near perfect match between those two, right? Yeah. And now we're seeing a lot of those changes. There's a lot happening in that exclusives market. Maybe it's a January thing. Probably isn't, though. There's a reason why these things happen. There's a reason why this bonanza has to end.
The amount of requests from big enterprises for OTP traffic, which are global names, global brands, and we knew that price targets were usually 50% from the direct. Mm-hmm. But now we're seeing that even more, especially on those exclusive markets. Mm-hmm. It's more difficult to find traffic that is going on a direct on 25 cents per SMS than it is compared to finding what is going on maybe 50 to 60% of conversion rate on a high quality route. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, it's 5 times cheaper.
Yeah. So there's a lot of game going on, with the drop of AIT. Gray routing is making a return, at least in large possibility. So again, this simply highlights the fact that whatever happens on the market, you need to be working with a provider that actually understands how these work and can give you advice on them and show you this there. These are the safeguards you can use. These are the things you need to look out
these
for.
Destinations that are high risk.
Yep, exactly.
All the basics.
Yeah. It's again another controversial take because we're advising businesses to not send messages to certain markets because it's a high likelihood
you
of
open
getting
yourself up to potential damages, essentially.
Exactly. We would make more money because ultimately if they send messages to that market, we don't know that they don't plan to send there. So ultimately those usually get charged because we get charged for them. But it's such a, backward logic if you go down that route.
That especially highlights it as well that we are there to help and assist. Mm-hmm. And I think, yet again, I'm not going to say anything about 100%, but we were one of the early adopters saying that, please, let's disable all of those markets where you know that you don't have customers. Do it.
Yeah.
Let's do it before you get hit because it's just a matter of time.
Exactly. Let's take 2 more questions, see what we get. What's the main problem you're battling with your clients? Marcus, what is the main battle you are battling with your clients? Main problem, rather.
It's hard to pin down one thing because every customer is different. Every market they operate in as well. I mean, don't get Well, what I would say is that if you have global customers, then just getting everything sorted, getting everything registered and done and working is really difficult because things change so rapidly. But it's really hard to pin down one thing. I think it's very different from customer to customer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
I mean, makes sense.
reviewing service providers, I think it's going to be a thing for the next few months at least.
Mhm.
So it's probably a problem that they don't know that exists yet,
Mhm.
but will be made aware of soon by the legal teams
Yeah.
in those companies.
Yeah, there's a big possibility that we'll roll into Q4 2024 with a whole host of new agreements on the table. Like,
Yeah.
wait.
So we'll be
Dora's
probably
coming
hiring
in.
to legal soon.
Yeah, well, probably. Yeah, I love the fact that one of the things that I talked about at the end of last year is, for at least for the first half of 2024, I don't want to hire. And here I am again thinking, okay, so we do
things
need
change.
some more people, right? At least the business is doing well enough to be able to allow that and to allow growth for ourselves as well.
Not a bad time to be in HR either.
Yeah, not a bad time to be in HR either. Exactly. Things are moving. Cool. Let's take the last question for today. Will SMS as a channel get dirtier in terms of scams and phishing? Who do you think will get attacked the most? That's a good question. So if you think about the channel, it is still quite a clean channel. On average, it's estimated that of the global traffic, I think Nick said that it's 3.6% spam and 3.3% malicious scam out of the total pool of traffic. So, you're still looking at between 7 and 10% roughly on average.
That's a global average.
On a
right?
global average of what it is. However, some of the things you need to take into consideration is that there are hotspots for targeting in terms of SMS scams. So Europe and the US are definitely the places that get attacked the most. So while the global average is one thing, it's a question of what's the regional average and how many businesses to actually get hit. And we've talked about this throughout the last year, that the development of AI also leads to the development of scam, because it's so much easier to create personalized scam these days now.
What's interesting, as far as I know at least, is that usually scams in Europe, at least, they start off in Sweden. They go almost like a domino. Sweden is the first market to hit. They have the most complicated cases or the newest scams. Almost like that. That's the first market you tested in, and then they target everything else in the region.
Yeah.
But I think probably Karl knows more about that.
I've heard him use the same term of domino effect before, where it sort of starts from the top and then transitions down in very many situations.
You have a copy in Swedish, then you use AI to use the same template, the same copy. You translate perfectly to any language you choose, almost. And I mean, it's blast away. That's how it usually works. But Sweden, interesting enough, seems strange.
I mean,
that's their market.
I mean, when we talked last year to the Estonian police and border force and talked about the dynamics of scam SMS and smishing and things like that, and one of the things they brought out was that the markets targeted are the ones that are economically the wealthiest. And Sweden is a very economically wealthy, strong nation with a lot of people who have financial funds to scam.
Higher, or the average
exactly.
hit, essentially.
An average hit actually nets you more money, and an average hit, one of the most interesting dynamics is it's not about what's the biggest hit you could do, but what's the average size of the hit you can get away with anybody without anybody really reporting it. And there are markets where 5 to 10 euros is a big hit, and there are markets where it is a subjectively smaller hit to that person because it's a smaller proportion of their total funds or how much they actually make in a month. And an interesting thing about scam is that people are quite often embarrassed due to when they fall victim to a scam. And if it's a 10 to 15 euro scam and they're already embarrassed, there's a pretty big likelihood that they won't report it. But if you don't report it, it doesn't get blocked and it just gets generated more. So that's another dynamic that plays into that as well. Will the channel get dirtier? I don't know. I hope that there will be more actions taken this year to use regulatory change, to use the same tools that they're using to fight that scam. But then again, I hope I'm not throwing too much shade on operators, but let's be honest, most of the time they're way too late to the party.
Yeah. It's like, who's moving faster, the scammers or the operators, you know?
Yep.
Probably the scammers.
Yep, exactly. So again, falls on us to do something as we've done so far. Cool. Marcus, Tõnis, thank you very much for joining me. Thank you for being here for the very first edition of Messaging Maven for this year. Thank you, everybody, for joining in, listening, and sharing your questions and everything related to that as well. I think there's a form in the comments that you can fill out and give us some feedback, give us your thoughts, give us what you think. If you don't want to fill in a form, just write to me directly as well if you really, really need to. Thank you for joining in. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for your insights. And I'll see you next time in the next edition of the Messaging Maven. Thank you, everybody. Bye.